The Aleutian Islands, a desolate arc of rock and ice, stretched into the North Pacific. In June of 1942, they became a critical yet largely overlooked theatre of World War II. Japan's audacious move to occupy Attu and Kiska was a calculated strategic diversion, an attempt to draw American forces away from the pivotal Battle of Midway, and to establish a potential staging ground to threaten the North American mainland. But for the few Americans on the ground, the Japanese landings were not a strategic chess move. They were a sudden, terrifying reality. On Attu, the invasion brought immediate, brutal consequences. The death of Foster Jones on June 7, 1942, and the forced internment of his wife and 39 other alates in Hokkaido, signaling the stark human cost of this remote conflict. On Kiska, a similar silent occupation unfolded, extinguishing the meager American presence and cementing Japan's foothold. Even before the first shots of a counter-offensive, the Aleutians unveiled their true nature. They were an enemy unto themselves, the vast, treeless distances, the hideous weather of squalls and 80-knot winds, the pervasive ice and corrosion. All presented immediate and insurmountable logistical challenges. This was a land without roads, without harbours, without respite. Into this unforgiving arena stepped Admiral Thomas Cassin Kinkaid in January of 1943. A black-eyed, rosy-cheeked, noisy Irishman with a pleasant bulldog face and hair shot with grey, known for his decisive, bold leadership. Kinkaid, who admitted to fighting his temper his whole life, arrived with a clear directive from the Joint Chiefs: occupy Amchitka Island, a crucial forward staging point just 40 miles from Kiska. Kinkaid's command initiated immediate, relentless troop landings on Amchitka, a desperate race against the notorious Aleutian weather. Though scheduled for January 5th, operations were delayed for 2 days as the severe weather closed in solid. When a brief lull came on the night of January 11th, Rear Admiral Charles H. Sock McMorris, a suave intellectual, ordered the army ashore. The spearhead, led by the brawling Lieutenant Colonel William J. Verbeck, blasted through the surf in whaleboats. But the Aleutians held a trick of their own. The destroyer USS Worden, navigating Constantine Harbor in a driving blizzard, was caught by a brutal current. It dashed onto a pinnacle rock which tore through her hull like a torpedo, puncturing steel and ripping open her engine room. With the sea running to 20-foot crests and the water a frigid 36 degrees Fahrenheit, the Worden capsized, smashed against the rocks, and plunged to the harbour bottom, a total wreck claiming 14 sailors. Another transport, after offloading 2,100 engineers and army troops under Brigadier General Lloyd E. Jones, careened onto a reef and lodged solid aground. The soldiers, soaked, swamped, and oil-drenched, faced a night in a blizzard without shelter. Yet, by January 13th, Amchitka was secured, a testament to sheer human will against overwhelming odds. This relentless resolve was first demonstrated with the pivotal Adak operation, an earlier amphibious landing that showcased initial American determination and logistical effort. It was on Adak that Allied headquarters moved, 1,000 miles closer to the enemy, transforming the center of frenzy into a crucial forward base. Here, amidst a pervasive mud and extreme conditions, Brigadier General Benjamin B. Talley's engineers, under Major General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr.'s leadership, battled the elements, laying the groundwork for vital airfields and outposts. It was a monumental undertaking, creating a base that, despite the hardship, offered minor comforts like electric lights and luxurious Navy showers. A stark contrast to the front lines. From the outset, the campaign highlighted an undeniable truth. The environment itself was as formidable an enemy as the Japanese. PT boat operations designed for speed and agility were particularly vulnerable. Lieutenant Clinton McKellar's division battled a violent squall that led to collisions and the loss of boats, including PT-27, holed by jagged rocks. Air Force effectiveness was similarly hampered. Constant, crippling failures of bomb bay rack mechanisms, caked with corrosion and ice, led to impotent runs and conscientious bombardiers' hearts breaking. Tragic incidents like 2B-24D liberators disappearing, and another crashing on January 18th, underscored the dangers posed by fog-hidden peaks and sudden willy wars. The Aleutian campaign would demand constant adaptation. A brutal proving ground, setting the stage for future, larger offensives, where survival often meant outwitting not just the enemy, but nature itself. With Amchitka secured, the American campaign to sever Japanese supply lines intensified. Tightening the noose around Kiska and Attu, Admiral Kinkaid dispatched Rear Admiral Charles Hess Sock McMorris and his tough little striking force to blockade the western Aleutians, turning the vast North Pacific into a perilous gauntlet for any Japanese vessel. Though not first-line soldiers, the Japanese garrisons, fewer than 8,000 on Kiska and about 1,000 on Attu, were ordered to hold at all costs. But this was a hollow command. Their reliance on vulnerable surface ships for resupply and dwindling seaplanes for air support became an acute logistical crisis. While some troops built Shinto shrines with captured American naval gunduds, they struggled daily with the gnawing realities of dwindling food, ammunition, and other essential supplies. McMorris's relentless blockade proved effective, sinking critical Japanese transports and severely impacting any ability to reinforce their isolated outposts. It was against this backdrop of escalating pressure that the Battle of the Komandorski Islands unfolded. A pivotal, dramatic clash that would decisively end Japanese naval supremacy in the North Pacific. On March 26, 1943, in the crystal clear, biting air, at 34 degrees Fahrenheit, McMorris's force was patrolling, almost 200 miles west of Attu. His force included the old light cruiser, Richmond, the 13-year-old heavy cruiser Salt Lake City, affectionately dubbed Old Swayback Maru or Seagoing Tea Kettle, and 47s to the 2 of Every Distinia at indicates of ages in 20 seconds flat. PBY reports indicated a fleet of several ships to the west. At 8:38 a.m., radar confirmed the presence of Admiral Hosogaya's superior Japanese northern force. 9 fast warships, including 4 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and destroyers, escorting 3 vital transports. McMorris was outgunned, outsped, and outnumbered 2-1. McMorris, a dedicated exponent of the calculated risk, made a split-second decision. Retreat would mean the enemy convoy would resupply Attu and Kiska. Prolonging the brutal campaign, he chose to fight. His objective not necessarily to sink enemy warships, but to protect his smaller force, while drawing the Japanese away from their transports. As the Japanese cruisers opened fire, at 12 miles their second salvo, splashing the decks of the Richmond, Hosogaya shifted his focus to the more powerful Salt Lake City. At 8:42 a.m., Old Swayback's forward turrets thundered, her 8-inch and 5-inch batteries firing full salvos, the concussion making her decks jump. More than 20,000 yards away, Hosogaya's flagship Nachi stood in faint silhouette, her guns erupting in hard orange lances of flame. The Salt Lake City's 4th salvo, deadly accurate, whistled across the sky, striking Naki and causing flames to mushroom at its base. Compounding the Japanese flagship's woes, a faulty generator temporarily disabled its main battery and forward electric power, and one of its own salvos tragically destroyed its second launch plane. The battle became intense, almost an anachronistic gunnery duel, a rarity in a war increasingly dominated by air power. At 9:10 a.m., the Salt Lake City took her first hit, damaging her hydraulic steering system. Captain Bertram Rogers, however, expertly evaded 8 Japanese torpedoes. Shouting with dark humor, fooled him again as enemy salvos drenched his bridge. But the old cruiser's luck would not hold. At 11:03 a.m., a brutal hit below the waterline proved critical, flooding an engine room, the after gyro room, and oil tanks, bursting steel bulkheads. Icy water, mixed with fuel oil, rose rapidly in the bilges, forcing men to stand chest-deep in the freezing tar and cork leaks with their own shirts. Salt water in the main fuel line then extinguished the burners, causing the engines to slow to a halt. At 11:50 a.m., Captain Rogers reported grimly, "My speed 0." The Salt Lake City was dead in the water, the Japanese fleet closing to 19,000 yards. In a desperate gamble, Admiral McMorris ordered a suicide attack. Captain R.S. Riggs led 3 destroyers. a mere 5,000 tons against the enemy's 50,000, blazing away with full salvos to buy precious time. As they closed to 9,000 yards, a critical, inexplicable turning point occurred. Admiral Hosogawa, possibly believing he was under air attack due to the American high-explosive shells and the presence of P-buys, made the decision to break off the engagement. By 12:03 p.m., the destroyers observed the enemy turning west, and by 12:12 p.m., the Japanese steamed out of range. Their crucial transports unsunk, yet their mission abandoned. Admiral Kinkaid would later remark, "The Japanese could have sunk Salt Lake City with a baseball." She was dead in the water. The Battle of the Komandorskis, lasting 3.5 hours, achieved a complete success for the Allied blockade of the Aleutians. Despite neither side sinking a ship, it decisively ended Japanese naval supremacy and supply efforts in the North Pacific, sealing the fate of their garrisons on Kiska and Attu, and bringing the end of the Aleutian campaign in sight. This engagement implicitly debunks the idea that naval battles are always decisive in terms of ship sinkings, showing how strategic objectives can be achieved through attrition, tactical maneuvering, and psychological factors, even without catastrophic losses. The human element, the tenacity of McMorris and his crew in the face of overwhelming odds, had turned the tide. With the Aleutian blockade secured, the strategic focus shifted westward. The decision to invade Attu, codenamed Operation Landcrab, marked a definitive turn from containment to offensive action. Yet, this pivotal move was plagued from its inception by flawed intelligence, deep-seated inter-service rivalries, and logistical miscalculations that would haunt the campaign. Admiral Thomas Kinkaid, driven by the urgency of the broader Allied war plan and the looming Aleutian fog season, pushed forward. With a daring leapfrog strategy, bypassing Kiska to strike at Attu. This plan, audacious in its ambition, largely ignored the stark warnings of Alaskan advisors, who understood the unique, treacherous terrain and the capricious weather. Internal divisions quickly surfaced during the planning. The top-level conference in San Diego on April 1, 1942, rapidly deteriorated into arguments, revealing deep-seated friction. General DeWitt championed the Attu invasion, while General Albert E. Brown, commander of the 7th Infantry Division, harbored skepticism about a swift victory. Admiral Rockwell, originally tasked with the Kiska invasion, voiced concerns about the troop strength and the nightmarish logistics of landing soldiers on Attu's limited beaches. His fears were soon validated as intelligence revisions dramatically increased the estimated Japanese strength from an initial, dangerously low 500 men to a formidable 2,600, forcing the commitment of Brown's entire 10,000-man 7th Division, a unit largely composed of desert warriors, ill-prepared for Arctic warfare. The operation was forced forward despite significant doubts, a testament to the immense pressure from the Allied chiefs of staff, whose strategic timetable often overrode local concerns and realistic assessments of terrain and weather. The Battle of Attu, far from the routine ground action, initially envisioned by American High Command, swiftly devolved into a brutal and costly engagement, second only to Iwo Jima in proportion to forces engaged. The belief in minimal casualties, an underestimation of Japanese resolve, and a failure to grasp the strategic importance of Attu were quickly debunked by reality. Colonel Yasuyo Yamasaki, commanding the Japanese forces, had shrewdly pulled his defenders back from the lowlands, fortifying snowy ridges with a network of bunkers and trenches. His objective was a protracted delaying action, drawing the Americans into a grinding mountain war, matching their spiritual strength against American brute force. The American invasion on May 11, 1943, though initially unopposed on the beaches, immediately encountered the true enemy, Attu itself. While the first waves of infantry found an eerie silence upon landing, the island's terrain and climate quickly became an insurmountable obstacle. The spongy tundra, snow, mud, and howling winds made progress agonizingly slow. Cat tractors meant to haul supplies broke through the quaking muskeg, their treads spinning uselessly, confirming Colonel Alexander's grim prediction that the big guns were stuck on the beach. Soldiers, exhausted from weeks of shipboard confinement, shivered uncontrollably. In the biting cold, they climbed by the flickering light of exploding shells through morasses of half-melted snow enduring a constant cold drizzle. This was no place for human beings, and American troops often fought for every inch of ice-crusted tundra, with many enduring conditions where they had not removed their boots for 13 days, suffering high rates of sickness and missing personnel. As the battle devolved into a grinding, attritional struggle, logistical failures and command challenges mounted. Communication breakdowns were rampant, exacerbated by a critical lack of radios and constant Aleutian static that fouled links between Army and Navy. And even within ground command, Massacre Beach, the primary landing point, became a scene of utter chaos, severely congested with supplies. Landing craft crashed, swamped, and sank in great clobbed heaps, delaying vital resupply and reinforcement. Combat troops, instead of fighting, were diverted to hand-carry supplies, like coolies, leaving some forward units without ammunition or food for up to 24 hours. The men, many poorly equipped with clothing inadequate for the Aleutian climate, faced an unforgiving environment that inflicted more casualties than the enemy. Amidst this logistical nightmare, a political storm brewed around Major General Albert E. Brown, the ground forces commander. Accusations of a lack of aggressiveness stemming from Kinkaid's misinterpretation of Brown's extensive logistical requests led to his controversial relief. Kinkaid, influenced by General DeWitt and General Buckner, made the solitary decision to supersede Brown. A move Brown would vehemently challenge in a detailed rebuttal drafted in 1948. In it, he argued his relief was without cause. And Major General Archibald Arnold later testified that Brown's perceived slow progress was a key factor. Though General Landrum, Brown's replacement, would praise Brown's original strategy, acknowledging it paid big dividends, Brown's name was not officially cleared until 1949, when the Chief of Staff endorsed his claim, implicitly acknowledging the systemic failures and political pressures that influenced such decisions. The battle for objectives like Jarmin Pass became a brutal inch-by-inch slugfest. American battalions were continually shuffled and committed to relentless frontal assaults against deeply entrenched Japanese positions. Wounded soldiers often lay for up to 48 hours in the cold In the cold Sumter, wet open at aid stations, where Major Robert J. Commish worked tirelessly under fire to distribute morphine and dressings, men limped on frozen feet and vomited silently, many with wet feet in their holes, leading to severe frostbite. Japanese Lieutenant Nebu Tatsuguchi, in his diary, recorded a continuous flow of wounded on his side and grimly estimated American strength as a division. A testament to the intensity of the fighting, the physical toll on American troops was immense. Willoughby's Scout Battalion, initially 320 strong, was reduced to 165 men, with only 40 able to walk without pain. Many suffering from bleeding, ulcerated lesions on their knees, from crawling when they could no longer stand. By the evening of May 28, the Americans had encircled Yamasaki's forces in Chichagof Valley, sealing off the Japanese with their backs to the sea. Despite American surrender leaflets dropped by a PBY bomber, Yamasaki, with fewer than 800 fighting men and 600 wounded remaining, opted for a desperate all-or-nothing counterattack. He burned his records, ordered mass suicides for the severely wounded in the hospital, and told his remaining troops, "We are planning a successful annihilation of the enemy." Lieutenant Tatsuguchi penned his final diary entry, "Only 33 years of living, and I am to die here. I have no regrets. Banzai to the Emperor. Goodbye, Tasuko, my beloved wife." At 3:15 a.m. on Saturday, May 29, Yamasaki's silent phalanx, many armed only with bayonets and empty rifles due to low ammunition, reached the American front line, undetected. They bayoneted sentries in the dense fog before giving the order to charge. The roaring horde and the dreadful Banzai cry met Company B of the U.S. 32nd Infantry, who were marching through the fog for a hot breakfast. The astonished Americans fled in calamitous confusion as the Japanese swept up Engineer Hill, overrunning a command post and a medical clearing station, where they bayoneted wounded men and a chaplain. Captains George S. Bueller and James W. Bryce, along with 10 wounded men, survived only by playing dead in a tent. holding their breath as Japanese soldiers charged through multiple times. High on Engineer Hill, Brigadier General Archibald V. Arnold found himself facing the full brunt of the desperate assault. He rallied non-combatant engineers, service troops, cooks and staff officers, forming an improvised defensive line. Borrowing an M1 rifle, Arnold directed grenade throws with calm precision and brought up a 37mm gun. Yamasaki's charge, though slowed by the withering point-blank concentration of bullets and grenades, reached the crest. The 50th Engineers met the Japanese head-on. With bayonets and clubbed rifles in desperate hand-to-hand fighting, breaking the onslaught. Though small detachments briefly reached a point near the vital 105mm howitzers, Arnold's 37mm gun and the tenacity of the engineers stopped them. Knowing his attempt had failed, Yamasaki saw 500 of his men commit mass suicide by pulling grenade pins against their chests. Later that day, he led a last foredoomed attack on Engineer Hill. His exhausted troops struggled against a now strongly manned American line. The charge broke, and Colonel Yasuyo Yamasaki, sword in hand, was killed by a .30 caliber bullet. Attu was secured, but at an immense cost. The battle proved the high cost of island hopping in the Pacific, becoming the second most costly battle in the Pacific, in proportion to forces engaged, and foreshadowed even more brutal campaigns to come. The mopping up continued for months as individual Japanese soldiers chose suicide rather than surrender. Only 28 Japanese prisoners were taken alive, none of them officers. American burial parties counted 2,351 Japanese bodies, many disemboweled by their own grenades. American casualties totaled 549 dead buried in collective graves, and thousands more wounded or suffering from exposure. Attu, a high-speed grindstone, had either polished men into hardened veterans or ground them down. However, the immense cost proved invaluable. The severe conditions led to crucial lessons in cold weather combat, equipment, and medical care. The proved combat experience gained in combating trenchfoot, frostbite, and gangrene, and in developing specialized equipment like the A-frame cargo hoist would save countless lives and limbs in subsequent campaigns. The Canadian troops at Kiska, for instance, would suffer only one case of trench foot due to their superior footgear, a stark contrast to Attu. The campaign provided vital lessons for the U.S. Army and Navy's leapfrogging strategy in the Pacific, demonstrating the strategic importance of the Aleutian chain for air and naval operations, and securing a vital outpost against the Japanese threat. The Aleutian campaign, a relentless grind against nature and a determined foe, was exacting a heavy toll on Japan's war machine, forcing a critical diversion of resources from other, more decisive Pacific fronts. The strategic importance of the northern flank became undeniable when American bombers now operating from newly secured Aleutian bases began to strike at the Japanese home islands. The first organized Paramushiro raid on July 10, 1943 had already inflicted damage comparable to the Japanese attack on Dutch Harbor a year prior, a stark reversal of fortune. Japan was compelled to bolster its northern defenses, stretching its already strained resources. This newfound offensive capability continued to press the advantage. On July 18th, Major Robert Speer, a veteran of perilous Kiska missions, embarked on the second Paramushiro raid from Attu, taking off in a doubtful shape spare ship in the cold grey Attu dawn. It was a 1,700-mile round trip flown through broken weather and a low-lying haze. Paramushiro's defenses were not on alert. Vice Admiral Shiro Kawase, witnessing the first bombs explode, wheeled to his window, incredulous. Bombs rocked several buildings and cratered the main runway, though a few anti-aircraft guns fired frantically, and Zeros eventually took off from a secondary runway, many not fully fueled or armed. One bomber, flown by Levin, had frozen bomb racks and engine trouble, and was pursued by Zeros, but escaped. The bombers returned without a single bullet hole. A testament to the element of surprise and daring, these raids, the first land-based bomber attacks on Japanese home soil from American bases, underscored Japan's inability to reinforce or hold distant positions against overwhelming American force. With an unbreakable American blockade tightening around Kiska, and under continuous, staggering bombardment, including 208,000 pounds of bombs, on July 26 alone, Japan faced an unsustainable situation. Admiral Kawase, the commander on Kiska, made a desperate decision: a risky simultaneous submarine and surface fleet evacuation of all remaining men. Leveraging the region's dense, ubiquitous fog for cover, the stage was set for one of the campaign's most peculiar and decisive events, the Battle of the Pips. Shortly before 1:00 a.m. on Monday, July 26, Rear Admirals Robert C. Ike Giffen and Robert M. Griffin, commanding a formidable naval task force within 90 miles of Kiska, detected multiple radar echoes. The battleship Mississippi's SC radar picked up 7 distinct pips at 15 miles plus, prompting the urgent bullhorn announcement: "This ain't no drill." The fleet, a powerful array including battleships Idaho, Mississippi, and New Mexico, cruisers San Francisco, Portland, Louisville, Santa Fe, and Wichita, and 9 destroyers, commenced firing. Great flame lances stabbed the dark as shells rained down at ranges between 8 and 12 miles. The New Mexico's radar log also recorded 7 distinct indications on the screen as it fired its 20th full salvo. Radar operators noted the targets changing course and zigzagging, but the battle was fraught with technical issues. The New Mexico's SC radar tube was jarred loose by its own salvos. One of its 14-inch guns was ruined by a prematurely exploding shell, and observation planes were disabled by the concussions of their own fleet's guns. Meanwhile, picked up a radar contact on Kiska Volcano, 76 miles away. Highlighting the line-of-sight limitations and quirks of early radar, the Pips eventually winked out half an hour after firing began, leaving no confirmed targets. The American battleships, each burning 1,500 pounds of gunpowder per 14-inch gun and consuming nearly 200,000 pounds of fuel oil daily, had expended massive resources on an unseen enemy. Post-war accounts from Vice Admiral Shigeyoshi Miwa suggested that Japanese submarines in the area received much gunfire but patrolled without fighting the enemy, indicating they were present and subjected to attack, but likely not the source of the persistent Pips. The Battle of the Pips remains an unresolved mystery, likely caused by peculiar atmospheric conditions or radar beam bending, highlighting the limitations of early radar technology and the inherent uncertainties of naval warfare. Crucially, the American fleet's immense fuel and ammunition expenditure during this phantom battle forced it to withdraw for refueling, inadvertently creating a critical window of opportunity for the Japanese. Taking advantage of this, Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura's evacuation fleet, consisting of 15 ships including cruisers Tama, Abukuma, and Kiso, and 11 destroyers, had already departed Paramushiro on July 21st. A chain collision in the dense fog soon reduced the convoy to 13 ships. But the Aleutian weather, often an enemy, now became an unlikely ally. Under the cover of a billowing fog front and freakish good weather for the Aleutians, Kimura's fleet steamed directly across the waters where the American battleships would have been. On the night of July 27th, they crossed the very area of the Battle of the Pips, undetected. Shortly before noon on July 28th, Kawase ordered the fleet to proceed to Kiska, successfully evacuating all 5,183 remaining men. This was a costly but strategically successful withdrawal, preserving a significant number of troops for future engagements while leaving behind a ghost island, despite nagging doubts and conflicting intelligence, including radar activity on July 22nd, suggesting a possible submarine evacuation, and reports of no anti-aircraft fire. Since July 27th, the Allies proceeded with a full-scale invasion of Kiska. These crucial warnings were largely dismissed or misinterpreted, overshadowed by the Battle of the Pips, which reinforced the belief in an enemy presence, and a mindset of expected heavy resistance, forged by the brutal fighting on Attu. Major General Holland M. Howlin' Mad Smith, General Simon Buckner, and other key figures grappled with the intelligence, with some wondering if they were seeing what they expected to see. Admiral Kincaid, commander of the entire Kiska operation, made the pivotal decision to proceed, prioritizing troop training and avoiding the perceived risk of a smaller reconnaissance mission. He famously reasoned that it would not hurt anything to go ahead with the landings, whether or not there were Japanese on Kiska. It was all right with me if they wanted to get off the island. The scale of Operation Cottage was immense, a colossal display of Allied might. On August 13, 1943, the invasion force Kiska departed Adak, comprising 34,426 combat troops, including 15,000 Californians, 5,000 from Buckner's Alaskan 4th Regiment, 5,000 from the 87th Mountain Combat Team, 5,300 from the 1st Special Service Force. Many of these soldiers were conscripts, drafted for home defense only. The 11th Air Force deployed up to 359 combat planes, conducting a 3-week air raid, with 135 sorties dropping over 304,000 pounds of explosives on August 4th alone. Naval bombardment was relentless, occurring 8 times in July and 10 times in the 2 weeks leading up to the invasion. Soldiers sharpened bayonets, cleaned rifles, and repacked field packs, with many on the unstable LSTs too nervous or seasick to eat. It was grimly assumed that 1 out of every 5 men in the first assault waves would be dead. D-Day for Operation Cottage arrived on August 15, 1943. The initial landings at Gertrude Cove, led by Colonel Verbeck's Alaska Scouts and Colonel Robert T. Frederick's Mountain Infantry, were met with an eerie silence and a pervasive fog so thick that troops squinted through the mist, hearing nothing but their own diesels and the distant roll of offshore naval guns. The expected fierce resistance never materialized. Instead, they encountered only stray dogs, one of which, named Explosion, was discovered by Ensign William C. Jones, and later identified as a pet he had gifted to the Kiska weather station crew. The realization that the island was abandoned began to dawn. There's nobody here anyway. Let's get across the island. Yet, the psychological toll of anticipated combat and the disorienting fog led to tragic friendly fire incidents. Soldiers, shooting at anything that moved in the soup-like conditions, engaged their own comrades, resulting in 24 men being shot to death by friendly fire. Furthermore, the Japanese had left behind booby traps and mines. The destroyer USS Abner Read struck one, resulting in 71 dead and 34 injured. In total, 313 Allied casualties were sustained despite the complete absence of the enemy. As troops explored the abandoned Japanese base, they discovered miles of tunnels, underground quarters, and mess halls with congealed food on plates. Scrawled on a barracks wall was a taunt, "You are dancing by foolisher order of Roosevelt. We shall come again and kill Yankee Joker." By August 18th, General Corlett was confident the enemy was nowhere on Kiska, later expressing, "I am tickled pink, we did not have to fight." Kincaid acknowledged, "Of course we had no way of anticipating our men would shoot each other in the fog." The Kiska operation, while demonstrating immense logistical capability, became a monumental, costly, and farcical blunder. Synonymous with Allied miscalculations, it attracted significant negative press and reddened faces from Anchorage to Ottawa to Washington. While the Japanese High Command reportedly enjoyed a hearty laugh, General Simon Buckner, ever the pragmatist, observed, "To attract maximum attention, it is hard to find anything more effective than a great big, expensive mistake." The operation debunks the myth that Kiska was a heavily defended Japanese stronghold during the invasion, highlighting the perils of overconfidence and intelligence failures. The Aleutian campaign, lasting 439 days and tying up 300,000 men and hundreds of ships, had concluded, marking the US's first theater-wide victory of World War II. The war's tide had receded from Alaska, but the lessons, however costly, would resonate throughout the Pacific. The Aleutian campaign, a relentless, often unseen struggle across thousands of miles of unforgiving ocean and rock, concluded, with the American flag once again flying over Kiska. This 1,000-mile war, as it came to be known, was more than just a series of battles. It was a proving ground, a crucible that forged invaluable lessons for the United States in its broader fight across the Pacific. It represented the US's first theater-wide victory of World War II, a hard-won triumph that secured the northern flank of the Pacific, preventing any further Japanese expansion and removing a direct threat to the North American mainland. The campaign's ultimate legacy was not merely conquest, but transformation. It provided crucial, often brutal experience in amphibious assault tactics, air-sea coordination, and operating in extreme cold weather conditions. The initial struggles against the hideous weather, where the wind cut like glass, and men endured conditions where they had not removed their boots for 13 days, suffering bleeding, ulcerated lesions on their knees from crawling, all forced ingenuity. Lessons learned from combating trenchfoot, frostbite, and gangrene, and in developing specialized equipment like the A-frame cargo hoist would save countless lives and limbs in later campaigns. The meticulous planning for leapfrogging operations that bypassed strongpoints, leaving them to wither and starve, was born from the Aleutian experience. This was a war fought as much against nature itself as against the enemy. And the hard-won adaptations here informed the very tactics that would define the Allied path to victory across the Pacific. But the cost was deeply human. For those who served the 1,000-Mile War left a lasting, often invisible impact. The extreme isolation, the pervasive fog, the bitter cold, and the often indirect combat all contributed to widespread morale issues. And the phenomenon known as the Aleutian stare, a peculiar vacant look in men who had been on the chain for 6 months or more, often observed in soldiers suffering mental breakdowns. Pathological boredom was rampant, driving men to desperate measures, with anecdotal accounts of soldiers playing ping-pong with themselves or even drinking shaving lotion. Life on the western bases could be a penal servitude, degenerating into wretched, bickering camps, a stark contrast to the country club perceptions of bases further east. The absurdity of logistical misallocations, like receiving horse manure by airmail or suffering through manhole cover pancakes and Roosevelt's rations of dead fish, punctuated the daily grind. Yet, amidst the grinding hardship, the campaign highlighted the extraordinary resilience and adaptability of American military personnel allocations. Attu, a high-speed grindstone, either polished men into hardened veterans or ground them down, forging raw recruits into soldiers capable of enduring the unimaginable. Many veterans returning home found it strange to see trees and women again, a testament to the profound shift in their world. The ultimate exoneration of Major General Albert E. Brown in 1949, initially relieved of command during the Attu battle, served as a poignant acknowledgement of the systemic failures and overwhelming environmental challenges rather than solely individual blame. His case implicitly recognized that the Aleutians were a unique theater, where logistics and nature often dictated the pace of war. A truth that High Command had initially struggled to grasp. The Aleutian campaign's strategic significance, once downplayed as a sideshow, is reaffirmed by its profound consequences. It tied up significant Japanese air and ground forces, an estimated 500 planes, 1/6 of the combined Imperial Air Forces, and 41,000 ground troops, diverting them from other critical fronts in the Pacific, such as the Solomons and the Philippines, as veteran George F. Noland succinctly put it, no more, otherwise it would have been world history. The massive investment including over $1 billion, the construction of 32 Army and air bases, and 2,000 miles of Alcan telephone line transformed the desolate chain. This infrastructure became crucial staging grounds for future operations. Most notably, the first land-based bomber attacks on Japanese home soil from American bases, demonstrating Japan's inability to reinforce or hold distant positions against overwhelming American force. The campaign challenged the myth that it was a minor or insignificant conflict, asserting its crucial role in the broader Pacific War. Today, the physical remnants of that struggle endure. Rusting relics of battle still litter Attu's mountainsides. Giant B-29 hangars and hospitals crumble on Shemya, and half-claffed World War II Quonset huts can be seen on the hills of Adak, where 3 small trees struggle for livelihood in the wind and fog. The Aleutian air remains as unforgiving as ever. Its willy wars untamed, the 1,000-mile war stands as a testament to the complex interplay of strategy, human endurance, and the overwhelming power of nature, leaving behind a legacy that continues to ask, if there was a lesson in the Aleutian War, have we learned it?